Please reserve your questions for Senator Parker towards the end of the session. And can we have Pushpinder Singh Saini? Have we been able to get him online?
Yes, we were just told him that I don't see questions.
So while he joins the call, yes, let me introduce him.
9-4.
Pushpinder Saini is recognized by both the leading independent legal directories, the Legal 500 and Chambers UK, as one of the leading barristers in the fields of administrative and public law, and civil liberties and human rights, and in media and entertainment law. He has acted as counsel in some of the leading human rights cases in the domestic courts and in Strasbourg and Luxembourg over the last 15 years. Those of particular recent interest include the ECJ case of Kadai versus Council, the House of Lords decision in Walker and James, and the Court of Appeal decision in Smith versus MOD concerning territorial scope of the Human Rights Act 1998 as regards British service personnel. He has also acted for the UK government in Strasbourg and for the Cyprus government in the long-running interstate litigation against Turkey. He acted for the British government in relation to claims brought by a former Guantanamo detainee, Binyam Mohammed. Pushpinder Singh Saini, can you hear us? Hello? Hello?
Speakers are on.
It is on.
It is on. Volume.
Hello. Hello. Everyone can listen. Hello.
Yes, you can have
Okay.
questions.
Senator, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I know that you are a long time in the Senator, but I mean in California, Texas, they are adding a 6 syllabus in the school. Can we just push the 6 syllabus in the school textbooks?
I'm sorry, I'm not adding, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear about the question. They're adding
My
what?
question is in California. Okay, my question is California and other states, Texas, they are adding a Sikh culture, Sikh book, Sikh identity in the books, in the textbooks. Can you, being as a senator, you can also put this agenda and you can add in the school books so that people they know what type of Sikh religion, from where they came, and those kind of agenda. Can you push it?
Yes, certainly we ought to have been a proponent for, cultural sensitivity in our curriculums in the schools. Certainly something that we ought, to be doing, not just for the Sikhs, but, for all types of diversity that we're seeing in our schools. There really has been the problem that we have, and I know the New York system a little bit better than the California system. In New York, we have actually done curriculum and development. We've left that to the municipalities and the local school districts. And so that's unfortunately more of a fight, kind of municipality by municipality. What we are focused on here in New York City is kind of like the 3 R's. So right now, there really is no conversation like there was in the early 90s about curriculums of inclusions or culturally competent curriculums that we all would like to see, but it's certainly something that we can push here, and I'll certainly love to. I'll get your information, and we'll work together to try to get that done here in New York.
The reason I'm telling you because we also, hit back when during the hostage of Iranian hostage. I was also victim. On that time, the Main Street people, they tried to throw me stone. And they said, you are a Muslim. Then, I had to run because as the children, they tried to keep on pushing me. Then I entered some shop.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of kids, they are bullying now. Is that we are getting all the complaints all the time in the schools. And it happens every day almost.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, I agree with you. Some of the bullying, some of the insensitivity that we're seeing is a result of people's ignorance. And certainly things like culturally competent curriculums will help bridge the gap between cultures, particularly in places like New York City where we have so much diversity. New York City, which is an immigrant community, immigrant city, and we have people from all cultures, all ethnics, all the ethnicities, all religions, and we certainly ought to be including that in terms of the way we're educating our young people. So, like I said, I'm certainly interested in working with you on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mic up there, huh?
Welcome to the slide.
I think this man is like that.
Can I be heard by the conference?
Yeah.
Okay. As Brisbane is saying, he's called from London. I'm going to speak about the impact of the recent decision of the UN Human Rights Committee in relation to the ban under French law in relation to Sikhs wearing turbans in photographs or residence permits. I prepared a short paper in relation to this issue, which I hope those at the conference will have access to, or your panel will be read. But for those who don't know, there was in France and remains in France a law which requires individuals who have got a residence permit to have photographs where they have no head covering and their full face can be seen. And under French law, the person who does not submit to such a photograph cannot obtain a residence permit. In fact, French law goes further, it covers not only voters, but also driving licenses. And this has been a feature of French law for many years. And the complaint, which was pursued before the Human Rights Committee, resulted in a finding by the Human Rights Committee that the French reason for such a law, particularly a reason of public safety related to identification of the person who has residence permit, was not a justifiable reason for interfering with the complainant's right to freedom of religion. That's from Stanley Quick. This particular French law is just one example of laws which run through the process of the European Union, and particularly in France, which on their face appears to apply to all persons of all religions and all backgrounds, but which have a very serious impact upon those who follow religions, which require certain dress codes or public manifestations of their religion. And the decision of the UN Human Rights Committee is in marked contrast to the decision of the other human rights body which governs states in Europe, or certain states in Europe, which is the European Court of Human Rights. Because unlike the UN Human Rights Committee, the European Court of Human Rights has a very poor reputation, in my view, of respect for religious freedom. and in a series of decisions, they will not only seek, but also those who have been granted space, the Strasbourg Court. Strasbourg is a city in France where the UN Human Rights Court says there is European Court of space. The Strasbourg Court has allowed member states of the Council of Europe to enforce bans on particular forms of religious practice. And it's very, very promising to see the United Nations body, the Human Rights Committee, taking a different view of that view which is taken in France, and within support of the Council of Europe. It's also particularly interesting to note that France may be out on a limb in this particular area, because if one can suggest the English court to this type of issues, the English court have a very, very enlightened view. The English court respects the rights of Sikhs and other minorities as part of essential civil rights to wear forms of religious dress. That's something which may reflect a difference in constitutional background between the United Kingdom and France. Those participating in this will be aware that in France, the idea of a secular state and the state not supporting any particular religious causes. The approach in England and the United Kingdom has been rather different historically, which is that people, as well as their armed robbers, and had there ever been suggestions in the United Kingdom that you could prevent a thief from obtaining a passport, a residence permit, or driving license, unless he took on his permit and had his photographs taken, I have little doubt that first of all, there would never be such a made by the English Parliament. Secondly, were such a made, I have little doubt that the court they was unlawful. By contrast, in France, the domestic court was perfectly lawful to subject Mr. Manchester to the form of humiliation, where he was required to remove his servant in order to obtain a residence permit. And it's very interesting to see how legal and constitutional cultures differ so much, but we are very close to France, but we are from another universe as far as respect for the rights of the minorities are concerned. One third aspect I would like to mention about the British Speaker activity is France's response, because France was required to provide a remedy to Mr. Rankin once the UN Human Rights Committee had decided this content in favour. Instead of providing a remedy would be very simple. France has simply said we will no longer require, or indeed other religious minorities, to uncover their heads as a condition of which that was the remedy. Instead of saying what we do, the French government wrote back and effectively didn't agree with what we were doing and made the rather surprising point that there was no problem with the parliament to remove their servants, because it's just the same as asking someone to take off glasses or spectacles or not to wear makeup. Now, it's very depressing that France would say that, because it shows that France really hasn't learned anything on this experience, because the French government appears to think that requiring a seat to take a step is just like asking someone to take off their spectacles. It's a very depressing position, and in fact, one really wonders when France will ever get it. When will they understand how important turbans are to see? When will they understand how important it is to certain women in the Muslims to keep their heads covered? But they simply don't get it. I think I've probably said enough about that case now, and I'm happy to answer questions anyone's got.
Any questions for Pushpinder Singh Saini?
I'm sorry, I can't really hear you.
Can you hear us now?
Not very well, I'm afraid.
Sir, thank you so much for your time. We'll follow up with you, and we really appreciate sharing your legal knowledge on this issue and what remedies and measures we can pursue further. So thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. I would now like to call upon Elizabeth K. Cassidy, Deputy Director for Policy and Research, United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. Elizabeth K. Cassidy joined the Commission in 2007 as International Legal Specialist and became Deputy Director for Policy and Research in 2009. Previously, she was Assistant Executive Director of UN Watch, a non-governmental organization in Geneva, Switzerland, where she monitored and analyzed United Nations affairs with a particular focus on the UN's Geneva-based human rights bodies. Before UN Watch, Ms. Cassidy taught courses in constitutional law, comparative law, and international human rights law at Princeton University, Seton Hall University School of Law, and the University of Namibia, and worked as a legal consultant to several human rights NGOs in Windhoek, Namibia. She also has practiced law in Washington, D.C. office of Akin, Gump, Strauss, Hoare, and Feld. Ms. Cassidy.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I'm happy to be here. Can everybody hear? Is this working okay?
Yes.
As mentioned, I'm here from the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, also known as, by its acronym, USCIRF, or USCIRF. Kind of a funny name, but that's what stuck. For those of you who aren't familiar, USCIRF was created by Congress in 1998 as part of the International Religious Freedom Act. We are an independent, bipartisan advisory body that monitors and reports on religious freedom issues around the world, and we make recommendations to other parts of the U.S. government, to the President, the Secretary of State, and the Congress. We're not part of the State Department, we're not part of the executive branch, so when I or my fellow staff members or commissioners come and speak to you, we're not speaking for the U.S. government, we're just speaking for USCIRF. As mentioned, we're independent. Our commissioners are political appointees, and they're bipartisan, 3 appointed by the White House, 3 by the leaders of the House, 3 by the leaders of the Senate, such that there's a 5-4 split, with the party that holds the White House having 5 and the other party having 4, and then there's 14 staff members, of which I am one. As mentioned, we have a reporting and advisory mandate. We issue an annual report every year, our last one in March. And we also produce reports, op-eds, statements, other documents throughout the year, which are all available on our website, which is uscirf.gov. Interestingly, following on Susan's talk, the International Religious Freedom Act is an example of a U.S. statute that looks to international law. I agree with you completely on the difficulty of many courts looking to international law, but in this instance, Congress, in creating this body, and it also placed in the same act reporting requirements on the State Department, in terms of defining what religious freedom is, the act looks to the international law standards, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the other relevant instruments. So those are what we look to in our reporting as to what constitute religious freedom violations. So as you all know, we've talked a lot about Article 18 of the ICCPR. This is a very broad right. It's an individual right. It's not just for community activities, but also for individual activities, as well as a right not to believe if you so choose. But relevant to much of what we've been discussing today, I like to say religious freedom is about rights, R-I-G-H-T-S, not just rights, R-I-T-E-S. It's not just about worshiping, it's also about manifesting, including wearing religious dress, other observances, practice, expression, and teaching broadly construed, subject only to the limitations that are specified in international law, which are quite narrow. So these are the standards that we look to when we're reporting on countries. Now we do, IRFA makes a distinction between violations of religious freedom and particularly severe violations of religious freedom. And most of our commission's mandate is to determine which countries meet a statutory standard for the worst religious freedom violators. Under the statute, they're called countries of particular concern, or CPCs, because everything seems to need to have an acronym when you're talking about statutes, right? So these countries are really the most egregious violators. The statutory standard is countries whose governments have engaged in or tolerated particularly severe violations of religious freedom, which is defined as systematic, ongoing, egregious violations, including violations such as torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, prolonged detention without charges, causing the disappearance of persons by the abduction or clandestine detention of those persons, or other flagrant denial of the right to life, liberty, or security. Very high standards. So as you might imagine, the countries that are designated, the State Department actually designates the countries we recommend. There are 8 that are currently designated: Burma, China, Eritrea, Iran, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, and Uzbekistan. So really among the worst, not only religious freedom violators, but just human rights violators overall. My commission, USERF, thinks that 8 other countries meet this standard and should be designated, although the State Department has not done so. These are Egypt, Iraq, Nigeria, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Turkey, Turkmenistan, and Vietnam. Sorry?
You need to add France.
I'm going to talk about France in a minute. We also have a watch list of some other countries where the violations are not as serious as CPC, not as severe as CPC, but are serious. There are 9 of those. France is not one of them currently, although I know that that's probably not popular in this room. Those are Afghanistan, Belarus, Cuba, India, Indonesia, Laos, Russia, Somalia, and Venezuela. However, just because the overall situation in a country isn't serious enough to meet either the statutory standard for CPC or our watch list standard, we do monitor worldwide in other countries, and we do speak out and engage on other countries and issues. So, for example, on France, the Commission has spoken out on various of the laws there that restrict religious dress. For example, in 2004, the law that banned conspicuous religious symbols in schools, which include headscarves, it affects Sikh children, conspicuous crosses, anything that sort of, so that was something we spoke out on. We've spoken out on decisions of the European Court when they rejected challenges from Muslim girls and Sikh boys to that law. So that's, of course, a different law than the one that is involved in this case we've been talking about a lot today about the identity documents. We've also, over time, expressed concerns. Switzerland, also not a country that's been on our CPC or watch list ever. They, in 2009, banned the construction of minarets. That was something of concern to us. And in this current annual report, we noted concerns about a trend in a number of Western European countries, including France, to impose increasing limitations and even bans on women wearing certain forms of Islamic dress in public. I'll be short because I know we're short of time. Just to respond to a couple of issues that were raised in the conversation before, just a couple of ideas off the top of my head with regard to France. As you heard from my bio, I've spent some time in Geneva. I spent more time dealing with the UN in Geneva than I have here in New York. One thing you all might look into is the Universal Periodic Review process at the Human Rights Council, where every country is periodically, their human rights record is reviewed. They're just starting their second round of that. They've been through all the countries once now, and they're just starting the new ones. I don't know off the top of my head when France is coming up, but sort of every few months there's this committee that has a meeting. And NGOs can submit information, although the deadlines for submitting information are well in advance of when the actual session is. So I would urge you to look on the website of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. The other thing is NGOs in Geneva can go there and speak out, hold press conferences, hold side events to raise these issues as a potential way to call attention to this situation in France. I mean, as we've heard, there's the committee option here that has already been pursued, but that's not a binding option. The UPR isn't a binding option really either. But it's more a way to put pressure on the government of France. And in terms of, there was a question about the International Court of Justice, which, as far as I understand it, is only for disputes between states. So if anything of these international entities, the venue would be the European Court of Human Rights, except there's, as has been mentioned previously, they've dealt with religious dress issues in a number of countries and haven't come out positively in regard, including they upheld the French law, the 2004 French law about religious symbols. There's case law on upholding Turkey's headscarf bans in universities and public buildings. There's European Court case law upholding a Swiss rule that public school teachers can't wear religious dress. So these are an uphill climb. So I'll just end there. Oh, one more point that I just want to make. For someone who raised issues of harassment in the United States, I'd encourage you to look into what the Department of Justice has, and their Office of, or their Civil Rights Division. I was just at a conference fairly recently where I heard some people present from the Department of Justice about their efforts to combat hate crimes in the United States, which include harassment based on religion or belief, and they do bring cases, and they have brought cases on behalf of a number of minority religious groups. So I would encourage you to look into whatever avenues they have there if you or your children are suffering harassment and abuse because of their religion or belief. So I'll just end it there, and happy to take any questions afterwards.
Thank you so much for your time, Elizabeth. We believe that the USCIRF does a great job in bringing to book those countries which do not give individuals their freedom of religion. And we believe that USCIRF can do a lot more in bringing to task France to finally give the Sikhs their much deserved rights. And before I call upon our next speaker, I would like to announce the release of the Global Sikh Civil and Human Rights Report 2011-2012. So this is basically a compilation of surveys that we carried out in 33 countries from members of the Sikh community, and it includes information about the various issues that the community faces, and whether it's bullying of children in schools or issues related to their identity. And then we have legal commentaries from top law scholars and legal luminaries on the French case of Ranjit Singh, and plus it also includes scholarly articles. And this report will be widely circulated next week, and we will also be submitting it to UN rapporteurs. And now I would like to call upon Bani Dogal, President, UN NGO Committee on Freedom of Religion and Belief. Bani Dogal is the principal representative of the Baha'i International Community to the United Nations. As part of the community of international NGOs at the United Nations, she currently serves as the President of the UN NGO Committee on Freedom of Religion and Belief, as co-facilitator of the NGO Working Group on UN Access, as co-facilitator of the GEAR campaign, Gender Equality, Architecture Reform, and as a past chair of the NGO Committee on Status of Women. Thank you so much, please.